Yo, what's going on, guys, and welcome back. Today we are doing the Getting Started on Hack the Box Academy. This is the next one in the path of the actual pen tester path that they have laid out. So we're going to go ahead and hop into it. One thing you're going to see me utilize a lot in this, guys, is I'm going to be utilizing my notes over here, and what I mean is I have a bunch of notes that I put together for the Patreon members, and there's cheat sheets and stuff like that in here. I use those cheat sheets all the time, so I am going to use them and show you me using them, so that way you guys see that they're worthwhile. So if you guys do like this content, make sure you like that button, hit the like button, sub button. Check out the Discord, man. We do live streams once a week usually, and then, like I said, the Patreon members get access to my notes and a bunch of other stuff. So it's a really good resource. I just want to show you guys the usage because I am updating it all the time. So let's go ahead and hop into it. First things first, getting started. InfoSec overview. So information security is a vast field, blah, blah. Here's all the things that it can encompass, is what they're saying. And that's just information security. That's not even IT. So it's a huge, huge process. Risk management process. So this is kind of walking you through identifying the risk, analyzing the risk, evaluate the risk, dealing with it, and then monitoring the risk, right? So this is just walking you through basic concepts right now. You guys can read about them. The CIA triad they show here is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That's something that you'll hear a lot in InfoSec. It's just, it's kind of like a game you got to play where you can have something super confidential, but is the integrity and the availability there? Meaning, if I lock everything down, but I keep it off the network because I'm like, I want it super secure, there's no availability, so it's not in use, right? So you have to play that game where it has to be right in the middle, or however it works for your team, right? Some things may need to be more confidential and less available and things like that. So red team versus blue team, this is something that you hear all the time. This is offense versus defense. You can see in the simplest terms, red team plays attackers, blue team plays defenders. That's very true. The difference is red team is very situational, blue team is very situational. It's not pen testing, but it is something that is very, very, very useful. Now, role of penetration testers, this is exactly what most of you are here for. You want to be a pen tester, or you're trying to get into that field, and this is what you are trying to do. So you can read about it. Most of you know what a pen tester is. They hack into companies' infrastructures with permission, of course, ethically, and they then take that information, write up a report, and give it to the correct parties. Now, choosing a distro. This is just in my opinion, whatever you want, whatever works for you. I get this all the time. What's your favorite distro? What's your favorite, Linux operating system, whatever? What's your favorite flavor of Linux, blah, blah. I'll tell you one thing. I started using Parrot way before Hack the Box came out with it. What I mean is came out as their main OS. I like Parrot. I've liked Parrot for years. Is it a little bit frustrating at times? Of course, but so is every other distro. Kali's good too. I have nothing against Kali. I have nothing against someone that just creates an Ubuntu image and just starts building their own OS. I have nothing against any of those. So the reason I use Parrot is because I like it. It has nothing to do with Hack the Box using it, has nothing to do with someone selling me on it, whatever. So use what makes you happy, what works for you. Now they're walking you through what a hypervisor is. A hypervisor is just the virtual. So VMware there's two different hypervisor types. There's bare metal, and that's going to be like ESXi hosts. What that is there is no operating system. It's actually all the VMware software is sitting directly on the hardware, and then you start making your VMs, right? VMware, for instance, I'm running on a Windows machine, and then I open VMware, and then I start creating. That's sitting on top of my operating system. So that's a different hypervisor. Those are the two different types. And the hypervisor is the actual software that allows you to run these virtual machines. So like VMware, Hyper-V, what else we got? We got all kinds of them. But the difference is just know that there's the bare metal versus the on top of your OS. So for our purpose, we'll be using a modified version of Parrot. So the Pwn box, they call it here, that we actually are going to use is a modified version. So this is it right here, actually. And we'll go ahead and clear these out. But apparently this is a modified version of, which I didn't know that. All right, we're good to go. So I thought it was just kind of Parrot OS. Obviously, it's modified in the sense that I knew they changed the background and stuff, but I didn't know they actually changed anything. So that's good to know. Here, they're just having it started up. It's the first time you're seeing it. Basically, you're seeing that you have your own box. It's very similar if you use TryHackMe. Most of you watch my videos, you know that you can do this. Hack the Box Academy allows you to do this, but if you don't have a certain tier, I think it is, you can only spawn the attack box once a day. So I hate that, because that means if you're working on something, you can't stop, right? So if you have something come up, sorry, you're screwed. So I hate that. But if you get a chance, it is a good box. It does run smooth. Use it. You're going to see me use it in all these videos, and the reason I use it, same reason I use the TryHackMe one, is because I want you guys to be able to follow along exactly the way I do. I don't want you guys to have to like say, well, I don't have that tool, let me figure out how to download it, all that. No, I want you guys to follow along exactly. So, all right, let's hop into it. Staying organized. This is probably the number one thing I can tell you as a pen tester. This is more important than any technical skill you may have. You can start practicing this by playing CTFs, okay? So this is just one way they do it. You can do it however you want that works for you, but you can see they have it broken down to projects, and then here's their Acme company that they're using, and then here's the EPT, IPT, and then you have evidence, you have credentials, data, screenshots, logs, scans, scope, blah, blah, blah. Evidence, credentials, screenshots, logs, scans, blah, blah, blah. You can follow that exact format. I do something very similar, but I don't follow that format. I just have it broke down into directories like that to help me. So follow whatever format works for you. You can automate this process. So like, for instance, when I start a project or when I start an actual pen test, I have a script that literally just creates all my directories for me. So it just says what name of the directory do you want, or what name of the company, and you put, google.com, whatever. And it's going to create all that tiered structure for me so that I can just start saving stuff. I don't have to worry about it. So you can do that. That's a super simple script. Takes you 10, 15 minutes. If anyone wants to see that or anything like that, we can go over that in a one-on-one. The Patreon members get a one-on-one too, so we can do all kinds of stuff. So if that's something that interests you guys, let me know in the comments and I'll actually release it. But it's a super, super, super simple script. I mean, I don't even think it's 10 lines. But all right, so note-taking tools. This is a huge one. You want a really good note-taking tool. We're using Gitbook for the Patreon. You can see here is our intro, team library. We have offensive. We have all this stuff. So that's what I use for it, and that's because it's linked to the GitHub for the actual channel, and you can do all kinds of stuff. So that's why. Notepad++, I use this every single day. Every single day I use Notepad++, and that's because I have it on my work computer. I have it on my home computer. I love Notepad++. I use it every day. So make sure you get a good note-taking app and you take good notes. What I mean by that is make them make sense to you. It doesn't have to make sense to everybody, but it has to make sense to you, right? I used to be really bad about taking notes where I'm in a class or something, and I'm really taking notes. I'm hammering it home. I think I've got this, right? And then I get home, a week goes by, I go look at the notes, I'm like, what the hell am I talking about here? And it's just because I'm just writing. I'm not paying attention to what I'm writing. It just helps me process data, so that's how I do it. But I've gotten better about taking good notes that I can refer back to later. You can read the other tools and tips if you want. Okay, so connecting using the VPN. This is how you're going to actually connect if you don't use their attack box. So here's you. You're going to connect to the internet, the firewall, then the VPN server. Once that established connection is good, meaning, hey, you've authenticated, you're good through that VPN server, now you can access the corporate entities, meaning you can actually access what you need to do. So if you have certain drives or a computer you need to connect to, whatever, this is the process that has to happen. What happens is this data from the VPN server to you gets encrypted, and then nobody can read what's going on here, so it protects the corporate environment. Okay, why use a VPN? That's exactly why. I just explained it. It encrypts the data. Connecting to Hack the Box VPN, so this is very similar to the TryHackMe VPN. you just sudo openvpn and then whatever your VPN file is, and they have an entire section to show you that. Again, we're using the attack box, so we're not going to actually use the VPN, but you will use ifconfig, find your IP address, and then you can actually verify that you're connected, because it'll be this 1010 network. And then you can see if you do a netstat rn, you're going to get your actual routing table, meaning that's the path it's going to take. So if you see it right here, you can see it starts connecting to this 1010. That's the VPN. And then, like I said, here's your help with VPN. So if you are having issues, you can get help with the VPN. All right, so here's where we get started. Pen testing basics. So common terms. What is a shell? So a shell is a very common term that we will hear again and again. You'll always hear shell if you're in cybersecurity. It's all over the place. So it has a few meanings. It does. You'll hear people say shell for not just Linux machines, even though that's where it kind of originated. But the shell is a program that takes input from users via the keyboard and passes those commands to the operating system. So at its core, that's what it is. It takes basically whatever you type, your input, and it pushes it to the operating system. That's a shell, right? So you'll hear people say PowerShell. That there's a reason it's PowerShell. It's still a shell. So command line, command.exe, those are all shells, right? So all it is taking that, whatever you're saying, passing it to the operating system. That's what a shell does. So if someone says, hey, I was using a shell the other day and they're talking about PowerShell, that's still a shell. So don't jump their gun. Okay, most Linux systems use a program called Bash or Born Again Shell, which is true. It's the, I think predecessor is the right word, but of shell, just SH. Now, aside from Bash, there's also these shells, but not limited to Z shell, T shell, blah, blah, all these. And yes, I know a lot of people don't fully, they don't know what these are. That's fine. They're just a little bit different. I've used Z shell and T shell in corporate environments, so they are in use. If you understand Linux, you'll figure that out. You'll have no problem. They have their own quirks and their own things, but you'll figure it out. So now we'll often read about others talking about getting a shell on a box. That is getting control of a box is all they're saying. So the target's been exploited. We've obtained shell level access, which means we have access to actually run stuff on the operating system. That's what getting a shell means. Now we have reverse shells, and we're going to cover these a little deeper, but reverse shells, bind shells, and web shells. Reverse shell, you are connecting back to me, reversing, right? So I'm listening, waiting for you to say, come connect to me. That's why it's reverse, because I'm not reaching out and getting you to connect. You're coming back to me. Now, a bind shell, that's the exact opposite. They're sitting there waiting and listening, and we connect to them, right? Then a web shell, it runs operating systems via the web browser. So we're going to cover that, but that's what it is. Now, what is a port? I get this question actually a lot more than you think, because the younger generation, or not younger, the newer generation actually doesn't have an issue with this as much. And the reason is because think of, if you're a young kid or anything, how many times have you ever actually went and plugged a computer into a Ethernet port on your computer or on your router, right? Not very often. It's very rare that people are doing that nowadays. But back in the early days of the internet, when I was, in high school, basically, you literally had to, every machine you had, you plugged it in. Wi-Fi existed, but no, I don't even know when Wi-Fi got invented, but Wi-Fi existed, but it wasn't something we used. It wasn't something I even knew anybody that used it. It was just like, hey, you have internet? Yeah. And you ran, I remember for my Xbox, I had a cord running from my room all the way to the next room, a Ethernet cord and cable, and that was how you did it, right? So Wi-Fi was probably existing. I just had no idea about it, right? So that's why I say the younger generation doesn't have this issue, but a lot of people get confused when you start talking about ports because they're thinking of a physical port that you're plugging into. That's not necessarily what we're talking about here when we're talking about ports and hacking. We're talking about a gateway or a door. So think about it as you have all these windows in your house, right? But in order for you to use the oven, right, it's going to get real hot in there. So you got to open the window in the kitchen. That's a port, right? You opened it up to use it. Now you gave me a way in. So if you forget to close it, I'm coming in, right? Think of a port that way. It is a opening. It is just a way into your network. Now, The protocols that run on these ports, these are, you can see the common ports and protocols. These are just established guidelines. So what I mean by that is if you see something running on 21, it does not mean it has to be FTP. It means that as a community, IT folks got together years ago and said, hey, when I run FTP, I'm going to run it on 21. So when you design applications, when you design external software and stuff like that, it will use FTP on 21 unless specified otherwise. So you can establish standards, so you can start designing infrastructures and say, hey, I need to SSH into it. Don't worry, it's already designed in there to SSH on 22, right? That's what it is. It's just a designated number for specific protocols, so that way you can actually understand, hey, this person, over there wants to do SSH, we're going to use 22, right? And you don't have to sit there and necessarily establish that, because there's certain things like port 80, right? That's HTTP. Well, if people didn't all agree on that, think about it. You'd go to a website and your computer would be like, I have no idea what to do. Like, this website's on port 400, this website's on port 5000, this website's on, and it would never find it. You would be confused. So if everyone uses port 80 for HTTP, then every time I go to a website, I know port 80, boom, 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 and it's easy. So that's kind of what it is, just an established guideline. Now, what is a web server? This is so many things. You can see they have their web server here, but all it is you go to a website that's on a web server. It's hosted on a web server. So when you're doing it, port 443, port 80, port 8080, these are all HTTP, HTTPS protocols, and it's going to take whatever you're saying and present something with it. So what I mean by that is, just because you're using a website doesn't mean, every time you use a website, you're using web server, but just that's not the only thing that can use a web server. So you might use an application or software as a service or any of that, and they might use a web server to host that for you. So when you go to xbox.com, right, whatever, that is a web server. It is hosted to run a software which you're seeing on your end, but the back end is still a server, meaning it's just a machine, a computer that you can actually access. Okay, so now many types of vulnerabilities can affect web applications. So the OWASP top 10, you're going to hear about this all the time. This is the current OWASP top 10 list. I don't know that they update this all the time, but I'm sure it's current as of today. But these are always the most, what OWASP is seeing as the most attacked vulnerabilities currently. So it changes. It usually doesn't change. Like, injection is going to probably always be on there, but it might be 5th one day or 1, it just depends. So keep that in mind, that when you check it, keep up to date on it, because things do change depending on vulnerabilities. All right, so basic tools using SSH. So SSH is just a secure shell. It's a way to log into a machine and get a shell securely for administrative purposes. And you can see here it is. It's as simple as SSH bob at the IP address, and then ask for the password, and you're in. That's it. It's kind of the back end version of remote desktop if you've ever used it. So now Netcat. What's Netcat do? It can do all kinds of things. It's just a network utility for TCP UDP ports, meaning it just allows us to interact with ports. It doesn't have a specific, it can only do this. It's connect to a port and see and it can do whatever you need it to do, depending if it has that capability. So you can see with Netcat, they were able to actually pull that, interact with it and pull that. That's a SSH port. Awesome. Okay, so that tells us right there that that's an SSH port. We don't have to go through and actually guess. Now, this is port 22, so we could have assumed that it was SSH, but SSH gets ran on a lot of ports, so we don't want to always assume. So using tmux, I'm not going to dive into this. You guys can if you want. Tmux is simply a program that allows you to kind of get more features on the terminal, meaning when you're on here, you can see they'll do like Shift plus, and now they have 2 terminals, but they're on the same screen. It just makes it a little easier. I recommend it. I like tmux, but it's just kind of preference. People use different things. Some people use, I think it's Terminator is one of them. There's all kinds of them. Vim, using Vim. So Vim and VI, I recommend learning significantly, because of the fact that when you connect to a machine, you won't have, if you have a shell, you won't have a GUI text editor. So you might get real comfortable with the text editor you have, like Notepad++, whatever. But when you connect to a machine, you're not going to have that. So you need to be able to edit files using something command line. Vim and VI on Linux is almost always there. So you can see when they connect to Vim, they see everything. Now there are commands, and you can see, like for instance, if I was on here and I was looking at changing this Etsy, just uncommenting that or something, I have to go down to there, push I to insert, and then I have to delete it, and then push escape to get back to the regular menu, and then push W, Q, bang, and that will actually save it and delete and exit. So I know it's a lot of confusion, but use a cheat sheet, use some guides, and learn Vim and VI because it will help a ton. You can see there's some shortcuts here. X cuts the character, cut word, cut full line, all that stuff. I'm not going to dive in and show you guys Vim because me walking you through it will not help you in the short term. You'll still have to go in and actually mess with it. So, okay, so there's actually something we're supposed to do. So challenge your understanding of the module content and answer the optional questions below. These are considered supplementary content, are not required. Oh, okay. So apply what you learn in the section to grab the banner of the above server and submit it as the answer. So here's the server, right? So it's saying grab the banner, and you can see, if you remember, whoops, right up here, they show us, we just talked about it, they show us right here that grabbed the banner. Now banner grabbing is very important because it gives you what's going on that server, whether it's going to give you a lot of information, it might not, but it's going to give you enough to start understanding. So we're just going to say netcat, and remember, netcat's just going to give us whatever information it has when it connects, right? 62.6, and the port is 33063. And we're going to hit enter, and look at that. So now we know that on port 33063, that's an open SSH, meaning I can connect to that via SSH. So now we go down here, we put that in there, and boom, that's our first flag, if you will. So now we go ahead and keep going. So we're ready to take it a step further. We're going to look at service scanning. So now we're looking at Nmap. If you guys know anything about hacking, you've heard of Nmap at least. Nmap is a tool that allows you to scan, and it just does so much. You can make it scan for so many things. This is what a basic Nmap looks like. So you Nmap IP address, it's just running your basic checks. And you can see it's going to tell you, okay, port 21's open, 22's open, 80's open, 139, and 445. Now, this is only going to check for the most common 1,000 ports. It's not going to check for any ports up past 1,000. I think it's 1,063 or something. I don't remember the exact number. But anyway, the reason, 1,053, I think. But anyway, the reason for that, there's 65,000 ports, okay? It takes a long time to scan those. So this does a quick check and kind of gives you the results. You can make it run. You can see here, they did it right here. TAC-P, TAC, right there. That actually will run all ports, and it will take a long time. So you can see they have Nmap TAC SV, that's service version. That's going to give you the version. So you can see right here, FTP anonymous. So right here, state service, FTP, and then here's the version, VSFTBD 3.03. That's what that SV does. It gives you that service version. You want that because that will, excuse me, start letting you look for vulnerabilities. Now you have the SC. This will run all the scripts. So you can specify which scripts you want to run, but it will run all the scripts. And you can see here's the host script results. And it will start, depending on what scripts are running, it will tell you some information that maybe you didn't know. It might be able to tell you like, hey, you can log into FTP anonymously, you can do this, whatever. It's going to run those scripts for you, so you don't have to specify it. Now keep in mind, these do get louder, meaning that you're sending a lot more packets, so you might get caught easier. And then port, that's all the ports. So you can specify one port, you can specify a range of ports, whatever, but that is all the ports. So you can see here they actually gathered from here the 2.4.41 Ubuntu server, and they got that from the title, the server header, excuse me. So you can see right here they start looking at, hey, let's find some vulnerabilities. So they start looking at the releases and then finding if they can find vulnerabilities on it and see if it's outdated, that type of thing. So you can see they look, and it is actually out, or is actually released April 23rd, 2020. So it's an outdated version, meaning, hey, they probably aren't up to date on stuff. So there's probably vulnerabilities, because that's the number one thing you're looking for is if something is up to date as of today, like let's say it got updated last week, I'm not even going to waste my time digging in. I'm going to probably go, okay, let's find something else to start targeting, because it's going to take me a long time to find a perfect exploit for this, but it's not going to take me very long if you have a server sitting out there that hasn't been updated in a year. So, so here is a good thing to say. So it's worth noting that cross-referencing technique is not entirely reliable. It is possible to install more recent applications on older OS. So what that means is you might have an old OS, but all your applications are super up to date. So everything external facing is still secure. So that could mean, hey, we thought this was a really good target, but as we're digging in, it's actually pretty secure. So you can see here's the script, the SC that ran, and that's what pulled the server header page and the title and kind of gave us more of the information about the web server. And then you can see the title and PHP info page reveals the PHP version. So the version of PHP might be vulnerable and the server's not. So you can see that you're looking for a lot of stuff here. Now, the Nmap scripts, here's the ones you can see they actually located the scripts Citrix, and they just looked at the Citrix ones. These are just the Citrix ones, but you can see it's going to run all these if you want it to, but you can specifically say, hey, I'm targeting a Citrix machine. I don't want it to run all of them because that's louder. People are going to see these scans, but if I run just one of these or something, it's going to be a lot less quiet or a lot more quiet. Now, here's the syntax for running it. Nmap tac script, then the script name, which would be the Citrix brute, whatever, then the port, then the host, right? That's the actual syntax. And then you can see they give you a box enumeration with Nmap for every basically detailed separation of these. So if you wanted to dig deeper into Nmap, you click here, go through that box, and you dig deeper. The reason I'm not going to do that here is because these boxes will probably come up, I'm going to assume, through this process. So now banner grabbing, this is really important because like I said, this is going to kind of give you your information about the server. So you can see, you can actually just say netcat nv 10.129. And then, like I said, I use my cheat sheets here. And so if I go to my cheat sheets here on the Patreon and I just go to netcat and then I just go to banner grabbing, you can see that I actually get the banner grabbing right here. And so I don't need to use theirs, right? I can, but I have my own all the time. So if I don't do banner grabbing every day, I actually have access to it. So now FTP, file transfer protocol, this is a big one because everybody has to transfer files somehow. This is one that's very common. You can see here, they actually show that they have anonymous login. So that's really, interesting because you can just anonymously log in and start looking at files. But you can see here's something cool they're showing here is they're doing the script check, they're doing the version check, but they're doing it only on port 21. So you remember on the first scan, if you actually did that, it would take a very long time because they're doing it on every port. But here they're just specifying on one port, which will actually save them a lot of time because they already know what they're looking for. So now let's connect to the service using the FTP command line. So they do FTP tac p, and they say 10.129 blah, blah, blah. And so they're actually connecting, and then you can see it's going to ask, it says name, and they typed in anonymous, and then it says login successfully. And then they hit LS and start looking right away. They can actually look at stuff because they did a anonymous. Now, when they got in here, you can see they actually saw a file called login.txt, and they did that and got the admin login for FTP. So that sounds like a very simple kind of mistake, but that actually happens quite a bit because there's a lot of reasons why an admin might save credentials on something, especially when they're working on like applications and stuff like that. So now SMB, server message block, is a prevalent protocol on Windows machines. It's very prevalent. It allows for vertical and lateral movement vectors. So sensitive data, including credentials, can be linked in network file shares, and some SMB versions are vulnerable. So that's true. Eternal Blue is one of the most famous. It was very, very vulnerable. Nmap has scripts for enumerating SMB, which is true. So you can see they say Nmap SMB OS discovery. So they want to actually look at what the OS is based on the SMB version. They do that, and it's Windows 7 Professional Service Pack 1, which means way out of date. So we already know we can probably get into this. And then they start looking at the actual, so tech A, capital A, is for all. We want to run everything at it, and they're doing it on port 445. They're trying to see if this is vulnerable to Eternal Blue is what it looks like to me. And you can see they get all kinds of information. And then shares, so now they're actually logging into SNMP client. So SNMP client's a tool that allows you to log into SNMP and start enumerating shares. So they did SNMP client and then tack in for no login, I believe, or yeah, suppresses the password prompt, which is no login, and then tack L lists, kind of like LS in Linux. And then you can see that they have the IP. Now these four, you have to always put these 4 dashes, okay, or backslashes. If you don't do that, it's not going to work. So don't put like 2 because you saw it and think that that's going to work, because you can see you have to put an extra one every time. There's 2 in the users, blah, blah, blah. So they did the SNMP client tool, and they actually look, and you see you got a users one. So they got a users share that's open. They go ahead and log in. Oh, it's got access denied. So the anonymous can't log into the users. But you can see that they have credentials for the user Bob. So they said, okay, let's try Bob's password. So they did SNMP client, tack U for user, Bob, and then they did that, and they typed in his password, which is welcome1. Now, we successfully gained access to the users. I'm just making sure, I think I have to start this. Nope, it's already open. Okay, so they already gained access to the users. When they did that with Bob's password, they were able to actually look, and then they had a passwords.txt file, so they were able to pull passwords down. Now, again, this seems kind of silly, but this happens quite a bit, actually. There's a lot of information out on large networks that people don't realize is sitting out there. Now, SNMP walk, you can see here, SNMP, SNMP community streams provide information and statistics about a router device. So simple network management protocol allows for a lot of network things to work correctly. Excuse me. My God, I can't talk. So with SNMP, if it's out of date, you can see if there's version 1 or 2, there is no authentication. So you automatically can get in. So they did an SNMP walk to figure it out, and found out that it's not past version 3, which is where authentication came in. So now they can actually connect directly to it. So those are the type of things you're going to be looking for. And you're going to be kind of looking to see if you can exploit those type of things. So the biggest thing is first finding what version something's on, applications, servers, all that stuff. So a tool such as 161 can be used to brute force the community stream. So what this is they're literally using a word list. So they're using this word list. You can see dictionary.txt is the one they used, but they're using the word list to see if they can find information about this through SNMP. Now, you can see they start pulling. They've got Linux, Service Scan, they've got Ubuntu. They're getting information about servers based on that. So you can see that that's very useful. And here's where they're trying to get you to connect to the actual VPN, which we don't have to do. So now perform an nmap scan of the target. So the target, let's go ahead and just do a normal nmap scan, nothing fancy. 10.129.66.190. We hit enter. What is the version? So you can see we don't have anything. It doesn't give us the it just gives us the service, but it doesn't give us the version. So we have to do SV for service version, and it says what is the version of the service from the nmap scan port are running on port 8080. So we should have read that. We could have saved a lot of time here, because I could have just specified port 8080, and then I would have gotten this only 8080 HTTP, and the version is Apache Tomcat. So you see I got Apache Tomcat. So now it says perform an nmap scan of the target and identify the non-default port that the telnet service is running on. Okay, well, that's pretty easy because I've already got it here from my previous scan. 2323 is open and telnet is running on it. So 2323, bingo. Now it says list the SNMP shares available on the target host. Connect to those shares as Bob user. Once connected, access the folder called flag. So the first thing we got to do is go up and look and get Bob's password, because I think it was password one, welcome one. So Bob and welcome one with a capital W. So what we're going to do first is we're going to go ahead and just connect, but we're going to log in as him. So we're going to say we're going to use this exact command. And the reason we're going to use this exact command is because it kind of gives us the information. So it says connects available shares as the Bob user. Once connected, access the folder called flag. So we're going to change it a little bit because we don't know what shares are there yet. So we're going to say SNMP client. We don't know what shares are here yet, so we'll get rid of those. We're going to log in as Bob, but we want to say tac L for list, right? And we'll get rid of Bob for now because we just want to list them for now and see if it gives us anything. Okay, so connection didn't reach, and part of that actually, now that I think about it, is probably because, let's see, did we check here? Well, should be on the right port. So what we'll do is we'll say, whoops, how did this get to nmap? Okay, interesting. So we'll just type it out because, so SNMP client, we want tac L and then tac N, tac L, because I'll show you why. So right up here, if you go back to and look at it, you want, first thing we're going to do is we're going to do no login and we're going to list the shares, right? That's the first thing we want to do. Now, oh, I know why it didn't work because we're not even using the right IP address. I never changed the IP. So we want the IP here, which is 10.129.66.190. And well, the reason we did N is we don't want to log in. And you can see we have a users one. I already knew that, but I didn't want to jump the gun. I want you guys to see it. So now we have the same command saved for Bob because that's the one we're going to use. I don't know why this is only saving some of the command. I don't want to type it all out. So we're going to go right here. And you can see basically what we're doing is we're going to connect to the share users using the Bob password basically that we already have. So we have to change the IP because the IP is not the same as the one in the command, 66.190, but Bob is. We know Bob's password is welcome1. We hit enter. Now we're in SNMP, so we hit ls to list. We have one called a directory called flag, so we cd into that directory. Now we look and we have flag.txt, so we say get flag.txt. Boom, 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 boom. Now we go over here and we say go home. ls, there's flag.txt. And there's our flag. So there's our final flag for the SNMP. So we mark complete and next. Okay, web enumeration. So this is another really fun one. We actually go through and start looking at web applications. So we go, they use GoBuster. You can use Dirbuster too. You can see they're actually using Dirbuster's common.txt word list. But what this does is it's going to go and run through basically it's going to run through and it's going to try different directories. So it might use a word like admin. So if this is the website, it's going to go through here. It's going to say admin. It's going to add that to it. Now, the reason it does this is because a lot of websites have directories that are hidden. And when I say they're hidden, they're accessible, but they're not advertising them. You're not going to find them without just trying it because you're going to get an error, and that error code is going to determine if it's usable or not. So you can see they have status codes of 200, 204, 403, blah, blah. Any of the 400 errors is telling them, hey, it accessed it. Now, it's not going to try and pull any information or anything like that. It's just going to tell you it works, it works, it works. And you can see here they have HTA password. All of these are things that they are directories that you can access. But you see they have the dot in front of them. That means it's hidden. When I say it's hidden, it means that if you go to that Linux server and type ls, it's not going to show up. That's all I mean by hidden. It's not actually hidden. But you can see the status code of 200 reveals that the resource request was successful, while 403 status indicates that we're forbidden. So when it says we're forbidden, it doesn't mean it's not accessible. It means there's something there, but it's forbidden. So you can see that still exists. We just can't access it right now. We can go to the website, but it's just going to say forbidden. So let's go ahead and say keep going. So DNS subdomain enumeration. So I did a whole video on DNS enumeration if you guys want to check it out, but There's also essential resources hosted on subdomains such as admin panels, blah, 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 blah. So that's exactly the same thing. What they're going to do is they're going to download, for this one, they're using the sec lists, and you can see where they're showing you where to download it. And then all they're doing is using GoBuster, and they're specifying we want to do DNS, not the web enumeration. And then they're just using inlanefreight.com, and the word list they're using is the name list, and it's going to start pulling all these subdomains. So NS1, NS2, and NS stands for name server usually. So NS1.inlinefreight. So those are servers that you didn't know existed. Now you're starting to pull together targets. So that's why GoBuster is really good for multiple different things. Web enumeration tips, banner grabbing, and web server headers. So again, you can just pull using curl, and you're going to get the web headers. Now, the reason you might want these, because a lot of people are like, I don't know why I'd want that. It shows you the exact version that's running on that server. What's that tell you? That tells you right there that, hey, this is probably vulnerable, right? Now, the reason I say that is because it's an old version of Apache, so you can probably tell that it's vulnerable. Now, another handy tool is Eyewitness. This is a really cool tool. I've used this multiple times. It actually will enumerate the website and take screenshots and stuff for you and save them, so you don't have to do any of that yourself. And it gives you kind of a lot of different information about it, because a screenshot might be a default page like that, the actual WordPress site here. You can see it's not set up yet. It will tell us, okay, it's not set up yet, so that it's probably using the default credentials still. So now, what web can extract the version of web servers? So what web, and then you get the version number, and you can see it's going to actually give you some of these some more information if it can find it. So that tells us what technologies are in use, because it shows the PHP and stuff like that, those versions. So one thing we can do, what web is a handy tool that contains much support? Yeah, okay. So the other thing is certificates. So certificates are big, because certificates have to be signed by a certificate authority, or else you get that pop-up that you guys have probably seen that says, like, this site's not trusted. Are you sure you want to go here? That's because that's not signed by a certificate authority, meaning the certificate on it isn't trusted. So that's why they pop up and say that. But when you look at the certificates, they have to be registered. So you can see they're actually saying we got, just from looking at the certificate, we actually have a email address that we can attack. We have the name, we have the organization, we have the city, the state, that stuff. So you can get a lot of information. Now, the robots.txt file, if you guys have never used it, very, very common. You go to, I actually just created a video on it. We created a whole tool that scours the robots.txt file and then goes to the website and pulls down words from the hidden directories. It's a really cool tool, but you can see when you actually go to the robots.txt file, it's going to say disallow, disallow. These are places that it doesn't want you to see when you're using like Google or web crawlers. So they're told not to actually crawl those sites. So you can see, though, that if you go to private, which is the one that they disallowed, it's actually an admin login page. So now we have some more access. So now you have source code. When you view the source code, pretty self-explanatory. So there's a lot of times where there will be comments in there from a previous developer, and the reason for that is maybe he was developing it and then it got passed off to another developer, and he's leaving notes in there for the next guy. And this stuff can happen, the test account, whatever. And when that happens, it's very common that, you know, those accounts probably haven't been changed, even though they should have been. So we'll go ahead and spawn the target system. Try running some of the web enumeration techniques you learned in this section of the server above. So we have to open it up. We'll go to the website first. So this is always what I do first. Now, some people might disagree, but I always go to the site if I'm going to start enumerating, because I want to see what I'm working with. And I'm a visual person. So you can see, make sure that you go to the right port. So 4303, it's going to be different for everybody. We want to go to the right port. So we say, let's go to it. Welcome to Hack the Box Academy blog. Okay, so nothing's crazy here. So remember, they said look at the page source. This is, again, what I always do. So, okay, so I don't really see anything in the page source. So we can close that, minimize that. So try running some of the web enumeration techniques you learned. So let's go ahead and run GoBuster, and we'll say tech U for URL, and it's 83.136.251.56 4303. Now I'm going to go up here and copy the path of the of the actual list here. So boom, and I just noticed that I have this as a capital U. Now from here we'll say we'll do this, but from here we'll do that, and that just lets us use the same text file that they wanted. All right, you can see right away we're getting those hidden directories, HT password, HTA access, or HT access, but you notice we're getting that status 403. So that tells us right there that those are actually forbidden. We can't access them. But you can see it's actually moving along pretty fast. We have the index.php, okay. And let's see, did we get any, is there anything that we're looking at yet that will give us anything that, we might be able to use? So robots.txt, server status. Okay, so let's check out the robots.txt first, right? So just copy this, paste, robots.txt. And you can see, okay, so they have an admin login page that's hidden. They didn't want us to go to it. So, whoops, didn't mean to open the link. I meant to copy it. So, admin login page. And then here's an admin login page. So I don't have any credentials, but let's check the page source again. And look at that. Remove test credentials, admin and password 123. So let's go back and say admin, password 123. Don't save. And look at that. We got logged in. So we followed all their enumeration steps. We got the password or the flag, and we are good to go. All right, so now public exploits. So once we identify the services running on ports identified from our Nmap scan, the first step is to look at any of the applications. So again, pretty self-explanatory. Once you find a service version or something like that, start doing research on it, right? Figure out if this one is very generic, Windows 7 SNMP exploit. I wouldn't even have done that because they actually, if you remember from when they showed it earlier, they actually knew exactly what service pack they were on and everything. I would be very specific when I'm looking, but that's just me. Now, you can see they're telling you you can use search exploit. This is just on a command line on Linux. You can type search exploit if you have Metasploit installed, and it will actually start looking for CVEs and things like that. The other thing you can do, you can actually do exploit DB. So this is going to add the search exploit feature, so you can actually just use search exploit. And you can see when you do search exploit open SSH 7.2, it's going to give you these, and then it's giving you where the actual Python script is. And then from there, you usually can search by CVE number 2. So there's actually some really cool usages here. Now, here's some other databases you can use online. Exploit DB I use all the time. Rapid7 database, Vulnerability Lab, Intro to Web Application, blah, blah, blah. These are all databases that you can use to look for vulnerabilities as well. Now, the Metasploit Primer. When you're running Metasploit, if you've never used Metasploit in your life, this will be great for you. If you've used Metasploit, you've probably used this feature before, but when you start up MSF console, you have a search feature. Now, you can say search exploit Eternal Blue. Now, what this does is it searches an exploit only because Eternal Blue might have auxiliary scanners and stuff like that. He only wanted the exploit. So he searched exploit and then Eternal Blue, and this popped up right here. Now, here it tells you you can use this by copying the full code. Just so you know, if you want to save time, if you've already searched it, see how it's number 4? You can say use 4, and it will automatically select this for you. You don't have to do anything like that. So, yes, you can apply complex filters like this, search CVE 2009, type exploit. So that's what we're going to do probably here. And you can see once you actually get in Metasploit, you have to show the options, change the options that are required, and then run the executable. The reason I'm skipping through it is because we're going to do it here. So now we can close this, spawn the target. We know we're going to have Metasploit, so let's go ahead and say MSF console. Now, answer the question. Try to identify the services running on the server above, then try to reach the actual thing. Well, it gives me the IP, or the port. So let's say SV94.237.49.147, and it gives me the IP. So I keep saying IP, the port, which is 47581. And we'll see if we get a service version here or not. if we get a good service, we can start digging into it. Okay, so we've got Apache HTTPD 2.4.41. Now, if you start looking into this, I will tell you, you will find some stuff, but there was no, if I remember correctly, there wasn't any remote code execution. But what's the first thing we said to do, or the first thing I said that I do when I start enumerating a website? The first thing I do is go to it. So let's go to it, because that's just, it's easy to start figuring out what are we doing here, what's going on. So 237, 49, 147, 47581. Getting started. Okay, simple backup plugin 2.7.10. So let's do this. Search simple backup. Okay, and there's only one, and it gives me file read access. Okay, so we're going to say use 0, and you can see it's telling me once you do, try to get the contents of a flag. So this is telling me that it can read a file, and this is telling me that the exact path of the file. So that tells me it's probably a good clue that that's it. So we'll say show options. Okay, you see we need file path. So we're going to set the file path, and we're going to say flag.txt because that's what it's showing there. Set our host. So this is the host that we're attacking, 94.237.49.147, and then we need to set the R port because it's not your generic port, it's 47581. Okay, and then that should be good. Let's go ahead and run it and see if I missed something. I might have missed something. Nope, I didn't. So here's where it's at. It's stored it right here. So we copy that and we say cat, hit enter. And there you go, hack the box, my first hack. Perfect. So we got that. Let's mark it complete, and let's keep on moving. So types of shells, we covered this before, the reverse shell, the bind shell, and the web shell. So let's dive into them. So the reverse shell. So on our machine with the reverse shell, we're going to set up this netcat listener. What this is this is listening. We're just sitting there with our port open saying, who wants to talk? Who wants to talk? And when someone reaches out to talk, we connect to them if they want to, right? That's what a reverse shell does, is we wait for them to reach out to us. Now, most people are like, well, that doesn't make any sense because no one's ever going to just reach out to connect to you, right? Like if you're trying to attack them. Well, no. But if we can get their machine to do it, the reason that's so common is because firewalls prevent people from coming in. They stop. But they allow everything to come out. So if it comes out, it doesn't raise any flags. All right, so this is the 3 flags that you're going to see all the time. You're going to see listen mode to wait for a connection, verbose mode so that we know we have a connection, and disable DNS resolution only to connect to the IPs to speed up the connection, and then the port, right? So you're going to see this all the time. Now connect back to the IP. So here they're getting their IP address, which is 10.10.10.23, and then... Okay, so now reverse shell command. So this is like if you actually had control of the attacker machine, right? You can put this command in here and have your netcat listener, and it's going to reach back out to you. Now, some of you might say, well, if I already have control, why would I want to do that? Well, let's say you took advantage of a web application exploit, for instance, where you're actually just sending it a command. You're not actually, you don't actually have full access. You just can run commands on it, which may seem weird, but sometimes you can run commands in the URL and stuff like that. This would then reach back out to your machine and give you a full shell. And then this is just different ones. And then PowerShell for Windows. So those are really good. I would take note of those. And then you can see here they're connecting, or they're listening, and then all of a sudden they connect and they're good to go. They actually have access. Now the bind shell, again, that's sitting on the machine and waiting. So the bind shell we might set up and say, hey, set this up, and then we'll reach out and connect. Now, again, keep in mind that firewalls, if that port is not open to allow you to bypass, you're not going to get in. Now, netcat connection, this is simple. Netcat IP port, you're connecting, right? So that's how you're going to connect to these. Now, upgrading TTY, which is just teletype is what it stands for. So every time you see TTY, it's nothing but just like literally the screen you're typing on. So what they're doing here is they're saying we need to upgrade. The reason we need to upgrade is if you've ever worked, and I'll tell you this, I upgrade shells when I'm pen testing and stuff like that. I do not upgrade shells when I'm doing CTFs very often, mainly because I don't necessarily always have to. It's a kind of a pain in the butt, but I know I'm only going to be on that box for 20 minutes. I'm not going to be there for 5, 6, 7 hours dealing with it. So here's what you do. You take this, for instance, Python, import, blah, blah. You're spawning a new shell. And then here, you're actually going back to your machine and backgrounding it and upgrading it that way, and then connecting again. Now, what this is going to do, you can follow these because then they have you resize it to make it fit your terminal and everything so it looks perfect. All it's doing is giving you more functionality. Your regular terminal or your regular shell, some of them won't allow you to backspace. Some of them won't allow you to use the arrow keys. Some of them won't allow you to do different things. So that's why you want to upgrade. It's more stable. It's easier to use, that type of thing. I recommend getting in the habit of doing it. And then once you've got it down pat, then you can decide if you want to do it every single time. So a web shell right here, this is a good example. And they're going to show you they upload a web shell to this server and have it sitting in the directory to where you can access it. So what that means is, look, they uploaded it, and then they went to it, so shell.php, and then they just gave it that command equals ID, because you can see it's looking for a command. So command equals, whatever you put after that equals is going to run. So you can see they put command equals ID, and they actually got the results. So you can actually say, hey, I want you to run this command, and then get the results. So then you could say, I want this shell, and then they give it to you, right? So last one we're going to do today, well, transferring files, but that doesn't have a thing. Privilege escalation. So privilege escalation, this is just understanding the basics of it. They don't dive in deep. They have checklists. There's all these checklists. I recommend checking them out, but because a lot of this enumeration scripts, you're going to see they're talking about the P's suite. This is LinPs, WinPs. These are the most famous in my opinion. They're very up to date and they work great. They just run through a bunch of stuff and tell you where you can escalate privileges, meaning you can get admin access. The problem is LinPs and WinPs are very detectable, especially nowadays. So most people are going to figure out that you're doing this on their machines. But if you understand how to do a lot of this stuff manually, you won't have that problem. You can run a lot of stuff manually. Kernel exploits. This is, you have a very out of date. For instance, shows Linux version is out of date. You can actually go ahead and submit based on the CVE, you can get dirty cow on there, and that's going to be a root level access, meaning you actually have direct interaction with the kernel. And a kernel exploit or a root kernel or anything like that, you're kind of you're at the mercy of the attacker at that point, right? Like if they have a rootkit on there, if they're very good, they can hide it. It's very hard to get off. At that point, you basically have to wipe the machine. Even then, sometimes they can stay on. So rootkit is kind of like the ultimate owning of the machine. I would never put a rootkit on like a VM that's used for a CTF or something, unless it's the only vulnerability. And the reason for that is because it's just not worth it. Like I don't ever need to come back to that machine and take it. And that's kind of what they're for. So vulnerable software. This is very good example here. We use the dpackage tech L on Linux or program files and just look at all the software on there and start looking, is this version vulnerable? Is it not? There could be some that has remote code execution and you don't even realize it. That's going to give you admin access, all kinds of stuff. User privileges, so sudo SUID bits and Windows token privileges. What these are going to do, you can see the sudo. This is what users have privilege to do. So sudo L is going to tell you what you have access to do as a user. Okay. And then from there, you're going to say, okay, for instance, this sudo L here, this user can run everything as sudo, meaning they can just run anything as admin. It's not a big deal. But when they do it, you see they're asking for a password. The problem with that is if you don't have the password, meaning you took over the shell without a password, now what? Right? You can't do it. So what they do here is they actually show if they use where is it? I thought they showed it. Maybe they didn't show it, or maybe I haven't got there yet. Oh, here we go. So here the sudo L will say, it'll say no password bin echo. So they can only run echo with sudo access without a password. So you can see here they say sudo tac u, and they run it as user because that's who's allowed to do it, and they echo hello world, meaning they didn't have to type the password in. So you're looking for this, that no password, right? Another thing you're going to look for is scheduled tasks. Scheduled tasks is very common. It's pretty simple. A task is scheduled at this time. It's going to run. It's going to do whatever it says, right? Well, if you give me access to edit that task, meaning you left the script that's running writable or whatever, I can just go into that and change it to do whatever I want it to do. And then when that time hits, it's going to automatically run that as a root access. Exposed credentials, that's pretty self-explanatory. There's configuration files and stuff. If the credentials are in there, we have elevated privileges because we have an elevated user's password now because they're going to reuse passwords. So you can see here they said sudo, they wanted to assume root, and they actually just used the password again to see if someone reused it, and they did, and now they have root access. Lastly, SSH keys. This is actually really common too. You use this ID RSA key to log on to machines to actually authenticate if you want to. Now the keys are hidden they're in hidden files. .ssh is usually where it's at, and they're on your home directory. Now, if we get access to someone's home directory, meaning like this home user SSH, if you leave that readable, I can go in and just read your SSH key, and I can just save it. And then I can go back to my machine and log in as it. So you got to make sure they're locked down. So you can see here, this is just a snippet. They didn't actually show the whole thing, but you can echo and then the SSH RSA and then the whole key and then user equals parrot and then save it as an authorized key. Now when you log in, you just say SSH and then you use the key to log in as the password and it just accepts it. So we'll go ahead and exit. So clear. So here we're going to actually start trying to get into the server and escalate our privileges. So we're going to use, initially, we're going to use the user 1, and we're going to say at 94.237.48.19. Now the port, unfortunately, is 46430. We say yes, and then, okay, permission denied. What did I do? Okay, user 1 at 94.237.48.19, 46430. Did I type no? No, I typed yes. Permission denied, public key. Oh, it's probably because, hold on, let's see. Let's see. Not sure why. We might have to reset this host because I already did it, so it might be waiting for the key. So we'll reset that host and we'll walk through. So what we're going to do, and like I said, it's probably because I had the key that was necessary and I used it last time to log in. So we'll go ahead and do the same thing, but this time change the IP and the port apparently. So we want 83.136.253.106, and then the port is 33325. Yes, permission denied, public key. Am I missing something? 83.136.253.106. Not sure why it's not taking it, but it could just be because I have that key. We don't want to use the key. That's the other problem. So let's just get rid of the key. We'll just delete it. So I know where it is. Whoops. CD desktop. And we'll just remove it. Remove ID RSA. And then try it. See if that fixes it. Nope, public key. Okay, let's restart the attack box actually. We'll reset the attack box and see what's going on with it, because clearly something's going on with it. All right, so and sorry this is taking a little bit, guys, but I want to make sure you guys see my faults too, because I don't want to just pretend that this is like everything just always runs smoothly for me. It does not. But my guess is because I've already connected to that machine with the ID RSA, it's trying to do it again. So we'll say at 83.136.253.106.33325. Yes. Permission denied, public key. Okay. I must be missing something. I mean, I'm obviously connected to their VPN, so that's the one thing that's kind of odd. But, oh, I see what the problem is. I'm an idiot. See, this is why you guys gotta see what's going on. It's not connecting to the right port, but they actually must have an actual. They must have a actual something on that port, because it still tried to connect. Like, it still popped up with the banner. So clearly 22 is in use somewhere. So that's my fault, but you guys get to see my flaws too. I wasn't specifying the port correctly, and for some reason, it was still trying to connect. Because normally that would have just said not connected, and I would have been like, okay, I see it. But all right, so now we need to escalate privileges. So first thing we're going to do is sudo tech L. That's the first thing they showed us. And you can see user 2 can run bin bash with no password. So that makes that super easy, because all we have to do is say sudo, and we just have to say user 2. Yeah, we're not even going to do that. Bin bash. This thing's laggy. It's making it very difficult. Password for user 1 is... Oh, okay, so it tried to run it as we needed to use the user, tac U for user. Okay, and then now we just say who am I, because this is really hard to type when you can't see what's going on. And you can see we're user 2. So right away, we're user 2. That was easy. Sudo tech L. And we don't have the password for user 2, so we can't do that. So you can just hit enter. It'll eventually time out that. Okay, so now we're back. We're still user 1, or user 2, excuse me. So now from user 2, let's start looking at some of the stuff they gave us. So let's go to the root directory, because that's where we know the flag is. We know the flag. There it is. Let's try and cat it. Don't have permission. So we do ls again, but we do la to see hidden directories. Okay, so we have the .ssh. So we know that there's an SSH key in here. And there's the ID, so we say cat ID underscore, cat underscore RSA, and there's our private key, so let's go ahead and save it. Woo. Okay, we want to make sure you get the whole thing, copy it, and then you can use whatever you want. We'll paste it, save as, and we'll just save it on the desktop as ID RSA. Okay, so now we saved it. So now we can open up a new terminal, and we can actually say SSH root at 83.136.253.106, and we'll put the port there. 33325. All right, and then we just say tac I for the actual location, and it's just in the desktop. Oops. Tac I, not tac D. Should be in desktop, and then ID RSA. And we should be able to be, and now we're in, let's see. Oh, so see how this is actually good to see. So I didn't change the permissions. So you got to change the permissions to 600 for an RSA key. And the reason for that is because if it has incorrect permissions, it won't allow it to work, because of the fact that that could be taken advantage of. So we just change permissions. We do it again. And we're in. So now we are actually in as root. And you can see it says root at. So now we say cat flag.txt. And there is our final one. So I know that was a lot of information, guys. We gained access to the first one, user 2, and then gained access to root. So I know that was a lot of information. We're going to cover the next one. That was over an hour, so that's a good video for you guys to start with. And then we're going to start diving into the starting out and the nibbles. So hopefully you guys like the content. Hopefully you guys watch it. And thanks, guys. Have a great day.